Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. Today we're taking a look at another Massdrop collaboration. I've got to say this to begin with. I find the We Knife Massdrop collaborations to be fantastic. Every single one of them that I have handled has just been exceptionally well done, and this one is no different than the others. It really is well done, except the cool thing about this is that we're getting a design from Michael Gavik. So if you're not familiar with Michael Gavik, it's Gavco Knives, and if you've been around for a while, like I have, you may recall back when Michael Gavik was a YouTuber, and I remember watching his Zero Tolerance 0200 video multiple times. He had a few Brose blades, I can remember that. Anyway, I remember watching him and enjoying his videos all that time ago, and following him with some interest ever since that time. Now, I will say this, he has very distinctive designs, and so I would anticipate that there would be some people who just think, yeah, everything he does is fantastic, and other people who would be a little bit put off because, you know, his knives, and this certainly is in keeping with his overall style. His knives tend to be very stylized in general, and a little bit different than the average ordinary stuff that you may be seeing out there. All right, and I get that that very strong sense of design from Mike is going to make a bit of a difference. Now, getting past that to this particular collaboration, this is actually a little older. It's been around for a while. I didn't pick one up just because the timing wasn't right. I was always rather interested, but I actually thought there's a BRS Thresher coming out, and I don't think it's still out yet. And I kind of thought maybe I'd go that route instead of this. But two things. Number one, while I was at Blade Show this year, I stopped at the Massdrop booth. I was chatting with the guys there for a while, and while I was talking with them, I was fondling this knife. In fact, not this exact knife, but pretty much this model. I think the one I handled had slab-sided titanium. But I was so impressed with the action on this, with the feel in hand, with the blade shape, that shortly after getting back from Blade, I knew that I needed to get my hands on one of these. It also helps, of course, that you guys use the links that I've provided to Massdrop, and eventually over time that builds up and gives me a little bit of credit, so I'm able to go there and get stuff. And so huge thank you for doing that. I have included a link to this knife, and so if you want this or any of the other Massdrop collaborations, the Keen or the Crux are my two favorites outside of this one, but they're all really good. If you're going to pick one up, if you use my link, that will help the channel. So thank you in advance for doing that. Now, let me get into some of the details on this particular knife. It's got some similarities certainly to the others. It's every bit as well done in terms of quality. We is consistently hitting these out of the park. Initially, there were some rumors that, hey, there's some fit and finish stuff or there's some quality control stuff. But that seems to be well behind us now, and everyone that I've handled or even heard of anyone else handling recently is just really well done. The other thing that I happen to know has been improved is the overall customer care sort of experience through Massdrop, which I guess now Drop. So this knife came out before they changed the name. I guess nowadays it would just say Drop on it, which, you know, that's neither here nor there. I hope that they keep up what they've been doing. These knives have been really good, and I really look forward to the stuff that we're going to see from them in the future. And I hope they don't change anything because it's been really enjoyable. So let's get to this knife in particular. This guy is 8 inches overall, 3 7/16 on the blade, so just a hair under 3.5 there, 4 9/16 on the handle, 3 7/8 inches of grip area. So quite a big, generous grip area. Now, the one thing I will say is there's no milling of any kind on this knife, so it weighs a little more, especially given that nice full backspacer there. That does add a little bit of weight and get this up to just under 5 ounces. I think it's like 4.8 ounces, which is, I mean, that's not heavy, but for a fairly small knife, it's a little chunky. All right. In terms of how this carries, it carries really well. As long as, you know, I wouldn't want to carry it, let's say, in a pair of track pants or gym shorts or something like that. But outside of that, it's very comfortable in the pocket. You really don't even know you've got it. And yet you do have a very capable knife. There's quite a good, you know, blade handle ratio here. So that's quite enjoyable. And thinking of that, let's take a close look at this blade now that we've kind of brought it up. So you can see the Gavco Maker's Mark there, S35VN, and you can see Massdrop on this side. I really, really like that satin finish from Wii. I know not everyone loves it, but I really, really enjoy it. Now, this blade is pretty interesting for a couple of reasons. One, we've got a full belly here, so there's no flat portion of this blade. It's just nothing but belly. That makes it cut really, really well. It's also quite thin behind the edge, S35VN steel. And the way they've got this sort of double clip point here, it allows you to get a nice purchase point for your thumb if you want to do sort of some finer, more detailed stuff, or even this configuration works pretty nicely. And I've used it a fair bit in both of those grips. I do like this blade an awful lot. S35VN, of course, is great. There's lots of cutting edge here, and it's all belly. Now, the only warning I would issue is pretty fine point there. Okay, where this is reminiscent of a Para 2, so I would not want to be dropping this. There's a really good chance you'll break the tip off your blade. But if you're careful with it, which I think most people would be with a knife at this price point, which is about 200 bucks, by the way, that's going to work out great. So I do like this blade an awful lot. Very nice, full belly, and I love that satin finish. Now, let me just make one comment about the thumb studs here. I'm not in love with the thumb studs. The name Thresher comes from a shark, and they're trying to sort of convey that fish look, and so they call this the fish eye. And well, I don't hate it, and overall I like the look of this knife an awful lot. I actually really find it attractive, but I would have been perhaps just as happy or even more happy if this wasn't black, if it was just, standard steel finish. So yeah, that's my only, little minor critique on the blade. Let's move on to the action, because that's something I can really get excited about. The action on this, like most of the Wii knife collaborations that we've talked about, is amazing. I can spidey flick it, I can thumb flick it. The detent is absolutely dialed in. If you were to be able to sort of adjust a knife and get it exactly the way you wanted, this is what you would want. It's just really, really nice. The lock bar is accessible, it's comfortable. Everything that you want to see in an action, this knife does. Look how nicely it drops shut. So yeah, they've really, really nailed the action on this knife. As good as any of the Wii knife collaborations, perhaps even better, because one thing I wanted to point out here, it's nice every once in a while to not have a flipper tab. I really, really enjoy the thumb action on this knife just because it's a little bit different, and it's nice to have something that doesn't have a flipper for once. It just feels like these days everything has to have one, and so going a different route with this knife, I think, is a really, really nice touch. So yeah, the action is fantastic. Very, very comfortable. Just, yeah, totally ideal. Finally, let's talk about the handle. Now, this is a particular version of this knife, so there are a number of other handle finishes available, or I guess handle colors available, and even shapes. So I think there's this one with the little cutouts here. There's a plain slab-sided one, and there's one more, and I'm just not remembering. But if you use the link in the description box, you'll be able to go to Massdrop, check out all the different options that they have. Now, be aware the different options do cost money. So if you keep adding more and more and more, I suppose you could bump up the price of this knife a little bit. I think the top end comes in around $225 or $235 or something like that. So just kind of be aware that yes, you can have different variants of this, but there may be a cost associated with the variant that you want to choose. All right, now we've got a full backspacer here. That's not the end of the world. I definitely don't dislike that choice, but it certainly adds some weight to the knife. I do like the way it kind of goes along with this look, and I really, really love, and we've talked about this before. Come on, focus. Let's see if I can show you guys. There we go. See how Wii does this sort of stonewashed anodizing? I love this. I really, really do. And I just find it to be so attractive. They did it on the Keen. They've done it on this. They've been a few other regular Wii models. Let me bring in, this is the 037. It's got that similar finish. This is probably my favorite way of doing an anodizing on a knife. I just really, really like it. So construction wise, yeah, I like this a lot. And again, just a reminder, you do have some of those choices. Stainless steel lock bar insert, as we would expect here. In terms of ergonomics, here's what I would say about this. In a hammer grip, it's okay. It's not the best thing I've ever felt. In a saber grip, it's very, very nice. And especially, I love this swale here in the back of the blade that allows me to get my thumb up here for some detailed stuff. So ergonomics are good to very good in a saber grip, and they're just good in a hammer grip. So that's how I would describe the ergonomics on this guy. Finally, let's get to some comparisons. And one of the things I want to point out here is the Massdrop collaborations are consistently very good value. Now, I will say they're able to be a better value because Massdrop, their business model guarantees a certain number of sales. So they don't start producing any knives until, they've already sold 1,000 or something like that. And so that does, because you can guarantee a certain amount, the profits on each one can be a little lower, okay? Where let's say if you're only going to sell 300 of a knife, well, maybe that's problematic, right? And you're going to have to bump up the profit margins a little bit to make money off of that knife after you do tooling and all that kind of stuff. So I will point out that they do have perhaps an unfair advantage over some other knives. Now, let me grab some comparisons here. First is just to bring in a Para 2 because everyone is familiar with the Para 2. You can see it's just a little bit bigger than this, although the Thresher is going to have more cutting edge, which is pretty typical of almost anything you compare to the Para 2 that's a similar size. It doesn't have great blade to handle ratio. Another knife that I think everyone is very familiar with is, of course, the Inkosi. And again, I mean, it's the same size as the 21, so many people are familiar with one or the other of those two knives. And again, that should give you a good idea of size. Now in terms of some comparisons, I want to bring in this knife. This is a recent WE knife, newer than the Thresher. This, of course, is the Malice. Now, here's where I think this knife really shines. So this goes for almost $300, as does the 037 that we brought in a second ago. Okay, and yes, the steel is nicer, so we've got M390 on these two. The fit and finish, though, isn't really any better. The action perhaps is a little tighter. I don't even know if you can say that, though. So this is very, very close, so close in quality that you really are hard-pressed to identify a significant difference, and yet it costs a good $100 less. Okay, so that's pretty significant and really demonstrates how good the value really is on this. I've got a couple of other knives that I want to bring in to make that point. First off, you guys know this is my favorite overseas produced knife. This is the Riot Knives Torrent, and I love this knife. It's fantastic, but again, the value is really, really showing on this knife. Now, yeah, this is a little nicer, a little more refined, just a little better finished. One other to really sort of jack up the price point here, there's the Arius. And the reason I'm bringing in some of these more expensive knives is to demonstrate this point. If you're watching this and you've said to yourself, man, I really want something nice. I really want something high end where there's just great attention to detail, great fit and finish, great action. This is getting you so close to these other really expensive pieces that it really becomes hard to justify spending the extra money. I still do it. I still enjoy those knives, but I just want you to know it's that good and comes in at a pretty reasonable price point. So overall, look, guys, I think the WE knife collaborations with Massdrop have all been great. Some of them have been too small for me, but all the ones that I've handled have just been fantastic. Probably to this point, my favorite is still the Keen, and the only reason I like the Keen better than this is I think it's just a little less aggressive looking. Okay, and this one, because it's a little more stylized, I like it a lot, but I can definitely see how not everyone is going to be in for this design, where I think the Keen is a slightly plainer design that's probably going to have a broader appeal. As we mentioned already, there were potentially some quality control challenges at the beginning, but those seem to be long past. And so any of these knives are really, really good. This one, I think, has one of the highest cool factors. Okay, and I've got to admit that about this knife. it definitely is going to stand out, and it's a little more impressive from a design standpoint than some of the others. And so if you really want something that pops, really want something that is as much of a piece of artwork as it is an effective cutting tool, you know, this is probably the standout from the Massdrop collaborations, at least up to this point. All right, so there you go, guys. That's my take on the Gavco Massdrop Thresher. Fantastic, fantastic knife, an absolute joy, and one of the most fidgety knives that I own. It's just really, really well done. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to use that link down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will talk to you soon.